Well, everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Like Captain Emerson said, we're all here today because with all of our backgrounds, we've all seen and known too many people that have slipped through the cracks. And the idea is, how do we use this incredible venue of an aircraft carrier that has such a unique and distinguished history? How do we use this to help people? Whether it's friends, family, coworkers, and we're in our beginning stages. Like you said, this is less than a year old. With COVID, we had to shelve a lot of ideas, but now that things are opening up again, how do we use this venue to bring people together from all different backgrounds in a way that helps them before they spiral too far down that rabbit hole? So with that, I think let's just share some of our stories and treat this as a brainstorming session where we have this beautiful aircraft carrier. We can use it for anything we want at our disposal, whether it's support, peer support meetings, keynote speakers, guest speakers, weekly events, something like that, clinical settings. How do we do it? And let's just talk a little bit about our past experiences, maybe go down the line and introduce ourselves, and then just chime in with things you've seen that have worked, things that you would suggest, things that in a perfect world you would like to see, and chime in. So with that, let's start down here.
Hi everyone, my name is Moran, and I'm a pediatric hematologist, oncologist, and bone marrow transplanter by training. And but most recently, I'm in biotech, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me.
I'm Captain James Pier. I'm at the Oakland Police Department. I've been with the OPD for 24 years. I'm also a retired Sergeant Major with the Marine Corps. I just retired from this ship. My retirement ceremony was right here. Both careers kind of like overlap, specifically with regards to PTSD and peer support, things like that. So on the Marine Corps side of the house, I employed, obviously, through those 28 years, it was some turbulent times. But as I was taking leadership roles, I was involved with the Forest Preservation Council that specifically was to address issues with Marines and sailors that were struggling with different things. I was a mentor for quite a few Marines that were involved in some pretty significant battles in the last couple of decades. So on a personal level, like on a micro level, I was involved with that type of outreach, as well as a larger macro level for the institution itself. The police department, I was the head of the peer support program there for, quite a long time, almost a little over a decade. So I've been involved in a lot of the training and mentorship there as well as trying to build a wellness unit and craft how that's going to come about, how we can kind of utilize that to prevent further tragedies. We were actually struck with quite a few suicides that kind of led to that, unfortunately. We had to lose some members of our department before it was actually came to the forefront where we actually had to deal with it. So that's the Reader's Digest version of me.
Good afternoon. Chief Warrant Officer William Armstrong. I'm currently the commanding officer of Coast Guard Station Golden Gate. Station Golden Gate is one of the units that has some of the highest instances of traumatic events that our folks deal with of any of the Coast Guard stations. Due to that fact, we have a resident behavioral health technologist and a program that assists our members. One of my primary responsibilities is to oversee that, and also just with the day-to-day operations, ensure that we are providing the best environment that we possibly can to help those individuals process and deal with some of the work environment things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. In the context of what we're talking about today, it's been tremendously valuable for them to have that embedded resource with us, just for, if nothing else, for the normalization of the help-seeking behaviors that I've seen with our crew and their openness to reaching out for help when they need it.
Yes, sir. Morning, I'm Chief William Day. I'm the Senior Behavioral Health Technician for the Coast Guard, and I stood up the program at Station Golden Gate in 2013 and have advocated for increased behavioral health Coast Guard wide since. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Vance, Lieutenant Commander Mary Vance. I am a psychiatrist by training, and my role in the U.S. Coast Guard is Director of Behavioral Health over the Pacific area for the Coast Guard. I am also Chief Psychiatrist over the Pacific. And I've been here just a short time, and the reason I was brought to the Coast Guard was to stand up a new behavioral health program for the Coast Guard and to try to destigmatize and get more people into care. Chief Day has been doing this for long before I have, but in my observation, there is so much need out there, including in the Coast Guard, and we need to find creative ways to address that need. And so I'm really happy to be here today as part of the discussion about creative ways to reach out to people. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Terry Moran. I'm a retired naval officer. I served 28 years in the Navy. Many of the time was spent on aircraft carriers like this one. I was a naval aviator, and my son is now in the United States Marine Corps stationed in Okinawa. When I retired, I returned to my passion, which is wooden boat restoration and sailing. And the light came on for me that brought a lot of therapeutic benefit for me, and I thought, well, this might be something that can be a benefit to veterans. So 5 years ago, we started a nonprofit called Wooden Boats for Veterans. We're up to 4 boats now. We've taken several hundred of the vets sailing, and we're expanding into vocational programs as well. So it's a real privilege to be here with you all today.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Mcdonald, and I am part of the nonprofit. It's a Christian nonprofit that provides peer-to-peer support, and we started out focusing on depression and anxiety, and it quickly expanded to PTSD, trauma, abuse, abandonment. So we are a group that meets weekly. We are not psychologists or therapists, so we don't offer advice, but we just offer support. We offer a listening ear. We just do life together. And in that process, selfishly, I found a lot of healing for my own mental health struggles. So I'm interested to be here to expand it beyond where we are now, because it's just been a lot of fun, actually, to be a part of these people's lives. They're really struggling.
Excuse me, just a little housekeeping. All these mics are live. This is just for that table down there. They don't have mics. So let's bring one closer to you.
Hello. Okay. Hi, I'm Angela Irizarry, and I'm a sergeant with the Hayward Police Department, and I am highly involved with our peer support critical incident team, and I'm also part of the Bay Area Critical Incident Team. I've been part of the program for the last 10 years, and in that, it has allowed me to really explore the different resources that are out there for our officers, but not just our officers, but also their family and children. Right now, I'm currently assigned with the Youth and Family Service Bureau, so I do work with a lot of therapists. Although those therapists are for the Hayward community, it has allowed me to research, what therapists are out there for first responders. Because one of the things that was challenging peer supporting my other peers was the challenge of going through EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program, but not finding a therapist that understood, what first responders dealt with. Because in this industry, it's, we deal with a lot of stress, not just the day-to-day stress, but also if they're involved in a critical incident, a shooting, or perhaps seen a very traumatic incident, a child death. 2 years ago, we had an officer that committed suicide, and then 5-6 years ago, we had an officer killed in the line of duty. So there's been a lot of trauma in our department, and one of the things that was a challenge was to remove the stigma, because a lot of officers, they were too embarrassed to want to seek help, and so instead, what they would do is treat themselves, and that's usually involved alcohol and drugs. Or prescription drugs, or they wouldn't talk about it, or they joke about it. But it was a lot of years of just building all that stress, and then they start seeing changes in their behavior, their performances at work. Sometimes led to divorce, separation, marital problems, and so we started to see a trend, and we thought, well, what can we do to make our program better? And so what we started to do is we're developing a wellness program, even to the point where we're going to be launching a wellness app so it allows officers and their families to download on their phone, and it gives them direct access to different resources. So if they're looking for a therapist or need to do a confidential self-assessment, if they're stressed, if they're dealing with depression. So it gives them that connection. So, and it's also, you know, confidential. So we're learning that that's what a lot of the officers want, is they want to make sure that they'll still be able to do their job and not worry about losing their job, you know, if they start raising their hands if they need help. From my personal experience last year, I sustained a severe injury. And so it had me even look at people that were off on workman's comp, you know, the stress of whether or not we were going to have to medically retire. And then dealing with workman comp, just the whole bureaucracy of that. Because we've had, you know, quite officers that are home and nobody's keeping in touch with them. And then they're suffering through depression. And so that made me aware that not only are we dealing with officers that are there in the department, but we also got to look at people that are off on workman's comp, even those that are retiring, because if that was their life for 30 years, sometimes they have a really hard transition retiring. So being part of this program has been instrumental, and I see in it, and it's great to hear that a lot more agencies, especially in the Bay Area, are starting to realize that, you know, mental wellness is very important for first responders and their families, because even though we may portray, you know, we wear the armor, you know, we have the badge and the gun, but we're human beings, so we're going to experience, we may be able to have more resiliency, but we have to know how to cope and deal when things come our way and to help each other. So thank you for having us.
Hi, my name's Heather Finlayson. I'm a district attorney with San Mateo County. A lot of the cases I deal with range from anywhere from simple misdemeanors like theft or DUIs, all the way to violent general felonies, attempted murder, armed robbery. And so a lot of what I see on the criminal justice end is the need for mental health treatment and support. And this is for everyone involved in the justice system, from persons arrested for crimes, defendants, to police officers, first responders who are investigating some of the most egregious crimes, to victims who are in a sense almost re-traumatized, having to come through the justice system, work with police officers and district attorneys, for defendants who do decide to exercise their constitutional right to a trial. But also for district attorneys, every day, now more than ever, our caseload volumes are so high. And it's to the point we have to compartmentalize what we see, the cases we're working on, the victims we're meeting with. And it's something that maybe in the moment you don't realize the effect and the extent it has on your personal life until the end of the day when you're alone and thinking about the things you've seen and dealt with on a daily basis during your work life. And so this is something I'm excited and I'm passionate about, especially on the criminal justice end, where a lot of times the focus is on punishment, retribution, but there's a strong need for rehabilitation, both for defendants and victims and everyone else that's involved in the system. And so for that, I'm excited to be here and hear everyone's ideas going forward.
All right, so my name is Gabe Rodriguez. I'm a retired deputy sheriff with Contra Costa County. Prior to that, I was a corporate executive, and at 48 years old, I went ahead and went in the academy. 6 months was good. Most of the other recruits were younger than my kids. And later, I became a trustee of the retirement board right about the time when PTSD was being recognized as a disability. So I was able to kind of guide some of the deputy sheriffs through the process. And like you said, you know, workers' comp, it's kind of scary, and they're already dealing with enough. We have a lot of ones I dealt with. We see a lot of carnage, as you all know, whether it's young children dying in a car accident, or we've spoken about people investigating child molestation type videos and stuff like that. Eventually gets to everybody. So part of the process, I'm glad to be here, is recognizing it. My son-in-law is a Berkeley police officer, and he is on their peer support group. He was the first responder to show up when that balcony collapsed, when the 7 kids died. And my daughter, who's a school psychologist, was able to make sure he was getting proper attention for it. And I've seen what she's done to support him. And not only is it good to have people like us helping, but I think also to have the family involved, you know, a significant other. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So I realize I should probably introduce myself as well. My name is Eric Jones, and I'm the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Sea Valor. I started Sea Valor about 3 years ago, going on 4 years ago now, because my 7th friend had killed himself here in Berkeley. And that was it. That was the final straw for me. I thought that something more needs to be done. These are people that, veterans or 2 firefighters, the person that killed himself had just won an Oscar before taking his life. And so for me, it was personal. I was one of the first people at the Pentagon on 9/11. I happened to be driving by when the plane hit. I was a young firefighter and paramedic. I spent 4 days at the Pentagon and then another couple weeks up at Ground Zero. And when I got back from that experience, I knew something had changed in me, but I didn't know what. I didn't understand depression. I didn't understand what post-traumatic stress was. And it took years of sort of spiraling downhill until I finally reached out and got help. And so I've seen it both from a personal standpoint, but also these 7 people that I've known that, like I said, these are America's finest. They're people that our country should be celebrating and honoring. And the fact that they slipped through the cracks one after another was just something that I couldn't stomach anymore. So our organization started with taking people sailing, much like Terry's organization. And Captain Emerson and I met over a year ago, and we said, how can we put our heads together and our organizations together and come together as a community to get these numbers down? I think we all know the statistics, whether it's 22 veterans a day, countless law enforcement, first responders, fire department personnel. And I think we could all agree that these are all American heroes, whether they're national heroes or community heroes. And the fact that they're slipping through the cracks is just something that all of us should be furious about. So the question is, what can we do as a community to put our minds together to get these numbers down from maybe 22 veteran suicides a day to 21, and then 20, and then 19. And we don't know how to do that. If anybody knew the answer, it wouldn't be the problem that it is. So we need to come together and talk about solutions and talk about what we've seen. Up here on this table, we probably have 200 or 300 years of combined experience, something like that. We have a lot of experience. And so the idea is, what works, what doesn't work, what can we do as a community that supports each other? And instead of being compartmentalized, where if you're a veteran, your only resource is the VA. If you're in the fire department, your only resource is the fire department. There needs to be more. It needs to be the entire community supporting each other. So with that, let's just talk about it. What have we seen that works? What can we do? We have this incredible venue. In a perfect world, what could help save lives?
I'll start off. I noticed with the sheriff's office, we have a thing, let's say one of our deputies passed away from an accident. Right away, the team went out and they were all assigned certain people and came, are you okay, anything we can do? And I thought that kind of brought it more to the front, like even though I was missing the guy, I felt horrible what happened, there was others I could talk to about it. And I think that was one good step the sheriff's office did. And I mentioned Berkeley PD, the Pier support group, something new they started. They chose the people they thought that could best relate with others there. So anytime, they recently had an officer commit suicide about a year ago. So again, the whole peer support group reached out. I thought that was really impressive. So from hearing from the people before me, they never had anything like that. So it's kind of a new cutting out on the front. So again, that was a good step in the right direction.
And I think like having a venue like this would be awesome, because one of the complaints that I would get from peers, if we had a critical incident, everything goes back to the police department. I mean, that's where the investigation is going to happen. That's where the attorneys are going to show up. There was an officer involved shooting. So it's always trying to find a venue that's outside of the police department where they can feel more relaxed, and then there'll be a lot more confidentiality. And I think that would be a great idea. I know some other agencies that when we brainstorm it, they have used like hotels or a community center. But if they had like a venue like this where we can actually set up a critical incident debrief or a peer support debrief, I think we would get more to participate.
So I appreciate these remarks so far, and I wanted to say something about first responders and kind of how we might think about them. So, starting from a Coast Guard background, the Coast Guard is the nation's uniformed first responders. That's essentially the link that we have with much of our audience here, and with you all at the table. We're a 24/7 maritime first response service, which includes law enforcement as well as search and rescue, as well as a number of other missions. So, in the Coast Guard then, what are we good at as first responders? We're good at rushing out there and saving the day when it needs to be saved in a crisis situation, right? Putting out fires. And that kind of translates to, I think, a general first responder culture where we can intervene in crises. So the Coast Guard has a lot of crisis and post-vention components that are very effective. Critical incident stress debriefings are a program that we have nationwide that we often call on to respond to difficult situations. If there's been a traumatic search and rescue case, if there's been a suicide, we often call on our, what we call SISM teams to respond. We have victim advocates for sexual assault. We have drug and alcohol representatives for substance use issues. So we have all these programs, that are innovative and that we kind of spread out as collateral duties among all our enlisted, as well as make it aware among our officers as well that these resources are available, and we kind of do a grassroots crisis intervention model that is effective in many cases. However, what we don't do well, and what I would argue most of the nation and probably other first responder services don't do well, is the prevention aspect of it. We don't invest enough in that as a nation, I would argue, and in our community and culture as well. And we need to do that more. So, the ideas that we've been throwing around of how can we get more people in to start to be connected with each other. I'm not even talking about, I hesitate before I say seeking care, because we're not even there yet. And the paradigm is to not necessarily need to get there. How do we get connected with each other? I think that's the question. How do we prevent, these downstream things from happening? And as far as prevention, there's many ways to do it. There are more superficial ways, and there are deeper ways to do it. Many people could put together an event and talk about it, feel good, and then go home, right? But what does that do? Do we have a systematic way, a systematic effort to do this? What is the end goal of when we're hosting one of these events, or we stand up a venue? What do we want? Who do we want to be connected with each other? Because the real value in prevention as well as recovery is in connection, social supports. The medical system, and I'm speaking as a psychiatrist, the medical system can help a lot, but the foundation is in the social supports, the connections that we have. So I would encourage us to kind of think about that too as we think about prevention.
Yeah, I really agree with those points and those made previously. Speaking from the military veteran point of view, a point that resonates with all of yours here on the panel is the idea that service doesn't end. So there are a lot of veterans that have come out the other side of their service, and they are missing that sense of mission. They're missing that connectedness, especially in today's world where you don't see folks joining the VFWs, the American Legion posts, and that sort of a thing. And so the path to find a veteran service organization where they can have the same sense of community is not always straightforward. And so if you could have a marquee venue such as the USS Hornet to be a collecting place or a common gathering place, that's all to the good. Military veterans need mission, they need community, just like the other groups represented here. And if you can provide them those two things and get across the idea that their service to others helps in their healing and their understanding of the events that they've gone through, then I think you've got a home run.
To kind of piggyback off both your points, what seems to work really well, and it's the biggest challenge though too, is to actually go out there and make the contacts, right, to get people to come here. So I really appreciated a lot of your comments, but I think in the spirit of it, specifically with this meeting, it's starting that conversation, right? Build the building blocks to get the foundation going. But what the military didn't do well, and the same with the police department was horrible about it, is actually that kneecap to kneecap, eyeball to eyeball conversation and being truthful and saying, hey, I know you're hurting, right? The Marine Corps was a little bit, honestly, easier to deal with it because it was regimented, structured. They actually had a Force Preservation Council. I could order someone to do something, which is not the best way we want to do it, but at least I could bring the horse to water. The law enforcement side is completely a different challenge, right? It's constantly being on top of them, constantly making the phone calls, going to the home, trying to talk them into receiving the help. So it's great that we have this venue, which I'm in total awe of every time I walk in here, and it's awesome that we have all these professionals here, but I think it's getting the message out there to bring people in. I would say on the Coast Guard side of the house, you could actually be a huge influence because you're going to know which Coast Guardmen are in trouble, right, that are having issues. And obviously some of their team members will let you know who else is struggling. But it's to reach the retirees. It's to reach the ones that are not connected to some kind of organization where they're not constantly being seen. That to me, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge for this to move forward. Because unless we're actually making those phone calls, unless we're bugging them, that stigmatism, specifically for our generation, I think is still there. The younger generation are a little bit more open, right? They've been kind of raised differently, so they understand it's okay to accept help. So when we do see the suicides, it's typically someone that's in their 40s, 50s, 60s. The teens, late teens, early 20s are a little bit better at reaching out for help than what we were. So like when we did have the VFW to go have a couple of drinks at and talk about and share war stories and get that de-stressor going to like offload that to someone that could relate, that's kind of going away. And then on the law enforcement side of the house, that was how we dealt with things, right? It was to go to the warehouse bar afterwards and chop it up and laugh. And even though there were some unhealthy things with that, there still were, which the consumption of alcohol in massive amounts, maybe at certain times, but they were still getting the stuff off their chest from people that they trusted, that they understood weren't going to go back and create issues. So it's, to me, there's two challenges. It's reaching the older generation and then bridging the gap with the younger generation who are more honest, but like, how do we go about bringing them into the fold? That's just my two cents.
And just to add on to that too, I think the exciting thing about what's being proposed is the resource, in a sense, of the common thread that exists within all first responders, military, that genuine desire to help others. That's what draws folks to that particular line of work. And with the Coast Guard in particular, being such a small service, everywhere that we're at, we're always leaning on and resourcing other government agencies that we work hand in hand with. And a lot of the traumatic events that we deal with, a lot of times are shared experiences with several other departments. And I think a resource center like this, where individuals from multiple agencies would feel comfortable coming together and talking about shared experiences and leveraging that common thread of service to others and finding that commonality, I think would be hugely beneficial.
So what would you like to see? What does that look like? Does that, let's say we want to plan something for January. What do we plan? Is it a barbecue? Is it a meet and greet? Is it a trivia night? What does it look like? One of the things we had talked about is with the Coast Guard, we'd like to have a Coast Guard Appreciation Day. And I believe it was December 12th. Which says, hey, your community appreciates you. We support you. And it's not necessarily billed in any way as a mental health, but just a step in the right direction of letting, having people come together and feel supported. I mean, that's one idea. What else?
I think you're on the right track with that, or maybe kind of like a wellness fair where we have different resources, because there's a lot of resources out there, but you just got to know where to find them, or unless you're referred to. We can do like an appreciation night, but then have representatives from either different agencies, their peer support team, therapist, just things that they can see. It's like a one-stop shop, so they can see what is available for us. And at the same time, just, we can network with others, maybe have a couple of keynote speakers, maybe to share their experience. Because one thing too that in our agency, what has helped is when our command staff, when they have the buy-in for something and they promote it, they kind of get like the rest of the troops to be like, okay, the chief is using, believes in peer support and it's just given us the speech of how it's helped him, or a captain, lieutenant, there's a buy-in, so it kind of convinces us like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. So maybe just bringing everyone together. I mean, we can start small and kind of build from there, but anytime there's a barbecue, I'll tell you, first responders will be there.
I'm going to add, I was a former vice president for a statewide county organization. We put on conference about 700 people, and what I learned is all about entertainment. It's really who's going to be speaking, maybe an event where you can bring your significant other, get dressed up. And there's a lot of, like we had Willie Brown, local, people like that can come and speak, or whoever you want. But I noticed if people would come if the speakers were there, or the entertainment, thing to go out with their significant other, get dressed up, be with their peers, have a nice dinner. And then I don't know if that's a family thing as well, a barbecue. I don't know if you involve the kids, but any opportunity people have, it's hard with our schedules. Everybody's off on the weekends. But any kind of thing that makes you want to go and spend time with your family as well. So you're just not a vendor going around your peers all the time. So I think along those lines would be good.
The networking aspect of that is huge. So I heard you earlier say that you had a hard time finding a therapist or a counselor that can relate. That's something I can definitely help you with. I can't commit for the doctor that we work with because obviously he has his own schedule. But that's just a perfect example. So we get everyone in the house and we have all these different peer support programs from Hayward PD, Oakland Police Department, the Coast Guard. You'll be able to build upon each other's own knowledge, right? Because it's why reinvent the wheel. And definitely, I know Berkeley PD did reach out to us as well because our wellness unit is a little bit larger, and I think it affected their peer support program on a personal level too because of who the person was. But if we have those contacts, right, and we can kind of make it more of a family event, and that's my son sitting there here. I take that stigma away, right? Bring the whole family into it. And if you have an issue, instead of trying to figure something out, you just be like, hey, I'll just call Jimmy Beer. Here's his phone number right now, right? And you can kind of, instead of trying to navigate troubled waters without a compass, you already know where you can go, right? If that makes sense. I'd imagine as far as your vision going forward, it's what I've seen successful for other programs, not necessarily just for PTSD, or it's not, again, not to be a treatment center, but just more of a constant. I know I can come here next week, someone will be here, there's going to be an event. A really good program that I work well with, and a couple of you might on the panel know, would be like Children of the Night or Dream Catchers, right? It's just a place where I know I can go to have a safe haven. I know it's not a 24-hour, 7-day a week where I can call where I'm having a stressful event or something like that. There's plenty of other phone numbers for that. It's just so, it's a place where I know it's safe. It's a place where people can meet and they have actual events scheduled out. So it's something to look forward to. Obviously, I'd imagine as it builds, then there would be a phone tree. We can kind of key off of one another, help each other out, and then, like you say, you can call one of us if you did have someone that was struggling, and we can kind of guide them to the right place, or we could at least be an ear to listen to. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is just right now, we're just trying to build it up where we actually have a sense of community, where different organizations can meet, and it'll be open for everybody on a scheduled basis.
That's right, and we get the funding. We're gonna have someone man the resource center here, but there will be a phone number, and they'll be able to call and direct them to that. But that's part of our master plan. That as soon as this is over, we're going to get together with all of you, hopefully, and we're going to sit down and we're going to, how can we work this? What works better for your organization? What didn't? What works for us? How can we meld this in? And then we're going to put a proposal, a grant proposal to the VA, and go into that.
So really appreciate again the ideas that have been shared so far. Things like presence of leadership, and if leadership is present, that it models to everyone else that we care. Things like having regular meetings. I love that point. That's what therapy is all about. It's the regularity. I always tell my patients, just schedule it. Just schedule it out, and then you'll know that you have someone to talk to at this time, right? So that's exactly what you're describing. Is I know that there's a place I can turn to on a regular basis, a safe haven for me. So I love that as well. Have food, right? Free food, a huge draw. Having a focal point, a speaker, some presentation, something like that. People are more comfortable coming to a venue where they know some of what to expect, at least some of what to expect, and then they branch out on their own. And the other things that I might add is just tap into that caretaking mentality that many first responders have. So, if we think about an event at night, weekend, probably with their family, they probably, it's precious time, right? So what gets them here? Is it something for the kids, so they can bring the kids here? Is it something, for the spouse who wants to get dressed up and, go out, right? So have something where the family's welcome and you tap into, they're wanting to take care of others and to continue to do it during their off hours. Make it easy. So one of the concerns that I might have is, well, how far away is the Hornet? Can I get a ride there? Like how do I, right? So, and I'm not sure how to address that, but for our retirees, older veterans, transportation is an issue. So how do we facilitate people getting to a venue, or do we have to think about reaching out to them, going to where they are, and make it free, right? Making it free, it just has that sense of, hey, I feel appreciated for my service, for what I've done. This is an event that I can go to, and someone thinks that I deserve to have this.
What Sea Valor does, which I like, is you get their guard down. I think first time I was selling at FBI agents, I had deputy A's, and it's like, no one's going to do anything stupid on the boat. I know they're good, respectful people. So when you do a function like you're saying, if I'm around veterans and law enforcement, I know my guard will be down, or so if I'm in an environment I'm not familiar with.
And even just walking around the hangar deck or walking around the flight deck or having coffee or something out on the fan tail, it's such a relaxing and safe environment that I think just being here will provide a certain amount of mental health and mental wellness, especially knowing, like you said, that you're around safe people. You can let your guard down for a little bit, whether it's 1 hour or 2 hours. Let the kids roam or something. They're not going to get lost. It's a museum. It's a wonderful opportunity. And yeah, free tours or something like that. Come bring the family. You had a nice tour with your family, and something like that, I think, is something that would stay with the kids, and it provides a nice opportunity for the parents and the kids to interact in a nice, safe environment. Maybe the parents can meet other like-minded parents while they're here.
One thing I want to add, you don't realize that people like to come to things. So listening to the Coast Guard, you may know somebody that's in the reserves that's a celebrity for somebody, and you have a lot of connections. You can easily get someone to be like the keynote speaker. And again, they always say the answer is always no until you ask. So sometimes you're surprised how much people want to help out and like to speak to audiences.
I can address what the VA does. So the VA has programs for treatment. The key is getting the veterans to sign up for the benefits that they've earned. And there's even, unfortunately today, stigma associated with that, especially for those unseen injuries where folks either want to tough it out or they don't believe that they deserve accessing those benefits. Once they get into the system, then they've got another hurdle to get over, which is to make that conscious decision to go and seek treatment. So looping back to what this initiative is about, I think it would be great to bring in some of the mental health experts and social workers from the different agencies who are just here, just present, they're available, and organically the folks that come to these events could perhaps take that step. But I think there isn't a shortage of treatment options available for first responders and veterans. It's just being able to bring them together in an open way where their guard is down, where the stigma of doing so is removed, with things like command presence, and so forth.
A couple of things that really play in here. First off, the individuals I work with do not want to be seen as victims or have any group to say, hey, you've been hurt, you've been injured, let us help you. They're not going to come anywhere close. But the second thing is, they don't know they've got it. Because the portrayal of PTSD in television, in movies, etc., is an extreme. And so they come and they say, why am I so angry? Why do I want to go out and have somebody come at me and so I can beat them up? What is this? They don't understand what it is that they have. And so I have to start there explaining to them, what you've got is called PTSD. And here's how we get to go with it. And so I think a lot of it is education out there on what is it that we are dealing with. And it's got to come from the media. There's got to be the pressure from you people combined to get media to portray PTSD as it really is so people can identify it. If I don't know I've got it, I'm not coming anywhere near you.
Sir, I wanted to respond to that. I couldn't agree more with that point, that there are specific ways of representing PTSD that I think can be a detriment, to us in society as a whole. And the highly dramatized representations, and the attention that's paid to, when, for example, when a mass shooter happens to be a veteran, and these sorts of things are really a detriment, to those who have served our country. And PTSD is the diagnosis that is often talked about today as a way to name trauma and stress. It's not the only diagnosis that's existed. Shell shock, World War I, soldier's heart, even before that. It goes through a number of iterations. So something that I like to tell my patients, colleagues, primary care providers working with me is just to educate that PTSD is one expression of trauma and distress. It's a specific set of symptoms, right? But there are so many manifestations of trauma and stress out there. It could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be substance abuse, it could be suicide. These are often not thought of when we think about PTSD. Sometimes they are, but there's a whole range of things that actually happens. And it is important, I agree with you, sir, to shed more light on that and recognize that in all its forms.
In that same respect, you're right, substance abuse doesn't go hand in hand with PTSD. The two last suicides that we had in the police department, alcohol and drugs were not a factor. Right? So that, although frequently that is an issue, just like you said, there's other issues like heightened awareness, becoming internal, all sorts of different things. So, both points taken very, very well, but that's, I think, the reason why we're here, right, is to bounce ideas off of each other, but we just got to keep an open mind that it's not always related around substance abuse.
So is the military or the police, do they have training at the entry level that trauma can happen and you can suffer consequences of this?
I know we just started, so actually I'm one of the trainers in my department, so that was one of my focus for this year was to educate, and one thing about being on the peer support team is, we go through a lot of training, and that way we will be able to recognize if we see our peers experiencing something, and also training the supervisors, because they're the first line supervisors. They're the ones that are with their teams, especially on patrol, for them to recognize, if there's a deterioration in their performance or in their, behavior, and also to train, the peers to, their partners if they start to notice a difference in their behavior as well. So there is a lot of training out there. In fact, their national university is offering through, they have the care provider, which talks about all this, like how to set up a peer support team at an agency and what resources are out there. and also signs and symptoms of PTSD, depression, anxiety, all that. And they're offering it to first responders for free. And you also get credit through the Peace Officer Standards Training, which is our post. And I know with our agency, you know, that was a big highlight. They're like, oh, you get credits, and also we also are able to get what's called an educational incentive. So that was, you know, like you said, sometimes money talks, right? When you can convince an officer to say, hey, you know, you get a bump in pay, take this training. But it has definitely has educated a lot of us, because that was the thing that was so puzzling for us 2 years ago, was we lost an officer to suicide. A veteran, someone that just did not show any of the signs of what we thought was PTSD. It was the complete opposite. So it was very puzzling as to, you know, why he would take his life. And that actually woke us up and say, what did we miss? What are we not getting? You know, how did we miss that? And it has opened, you know, dialogue, discussions, a lot of training, but we're focusing a lot on training our department and recognizing a lot of these things and making mental wellness a priority.
I have a question for the two active law enforcement. Is there two questions? One, is there a local or statewide agency for peer support? There is. Yes. And I think that would be one to kind of recognize. The other thing, I know we had to do mandatory first aid, whatever, as part of the post, which is police officer standards and training. Have you ever considered what you're talking about as being mandatory or taught once a year?
I guess that would be something that we can bring up to post.
Right.
I think right now it's kind of like an elective, but I think just with, like you said, with first aid and CPR, that would go hand in hand. So I think that would just be a matter of, I don't know how post decides what's mandated or not. But I think with the course that I just took, the way they were able to get officers to sign up was because they were getting credit. And in some agencies, they were allowing them to get like an educational incentive pay for taking the course.
I can speak to that too with regards to the Coast Guard. The training starts in boot camp, you know, and you're exposed to it, build up resiliency, and then throughout the year, you get training on it. Specifically because of the high amount of trauma that Station Golden Gate was exposed to with regards to people suiciding off the Golden Gate Bridge. That crew had a tough time. You know, and I got there in 2013, so all the things that you've shared, you know, Sergeant, and Captain, kind of your experiences, prior Marine, and just exposure to a bunch of traumas, they had a hard time, behavioral health-wise. And what changed was me going there as a peer, essentially, being embedded with the crew to help reduce the taboo and the stigma associated with behavioral health. And it was a culture change, right? So imagine going to a highly specialized operational crew within the military and getting them to sit down and talk about their feelings, you know? And that's essentially what it took. It took a while for me to become embedded in a part of the crew and to gain that trust, but that kind of regularity, you know, regular meetings, discussions with peers, and getting the trust at a place where people felt comfortable was what changed the crew, you know? And it's statistically, you look at the numbers of issues, you know, UCMJ violations, alcohol, you know, domestic violence, all the, you know, things that result of potentially people not coping with their behavioral health problem. It got better, you know. There's super high numbers, you know, before the program was initiated, and since it's been like nil. So having embedded, you know, easy peers that reach out and are part of a homogenous group, you know, veterans that can relate and kind of destigmatize the culture is, I think, the answer. And if we could, you know, establish this as a venue to do that with all the incentives to try to get people here, I believe in that.
What have you seen over the years that helps destigmatize it?
I think, like most things, education. you know, and making it a part of normal ops where it's not scary to have people come and sit you down in a group and talk about your feelings. It's part of the policy, you know, and what we have seen with the Station Golden Gate crew is that they're more resilient and more open to talking about things that are bothering them, you know, and there's a special kind of connection that happens with that too. When you have people with shared experiences, you can kind of process and go through that. So yeah, in my opinion, number one, access to care and having someone that you know and trust that you can talk to about that sort of thing, and then just making it a normal part of how you conduct business.
I'm just going to speak for the Marine Corps. I'm not sure about all the branches of services, but that has been recognized specifically after around 2005, 2006. I've had security clearance throughout my tenure in the Marine Corps. Prior to leaving, they had instituted the, and I had to look it up to make sure I didn't mess up the acronym, but the Psychological Health Outreach Program specifically embeds non-governmental organizational person, right? And every year there would be a survey, and it was given to everyone from the commanding officer all the way down to the lowly private, the same questions. And that went specifically to that one person. She could not release anything to the commanding officer unless that individual was actually going to claim they were going to hurt. It's the same stuff that we have to deal with in law enforcement, unless they're actively going to hurt someone right then and there. And it was very well received. All the Marines and sailors were very honest. There were people identified. They didn't lose their security clearance. And that is actually more of a, I would say, more of a stigma or threat on the law enforcement side, specifically with federal agents. They still have that issue. I think at OPD and some of the other agencies, because they've been hammering that forward, that stigma's been taken away. But the military definitely recognized it as after 9/11. That if someone had concerns losing their security clearance, losing their job, that they had to do something different. And that's why they instituted the PHOP program. And it's been going strong. It's been actually a very successful program. It's saved Marines, not just their lives, but also their careers, because it's not, that individual cannot release what's going on with that individual to their command. And to, you know, hires up, because people voiced that concern for many, many years is why they brought it to the forefront.
And I think some component of education around that is important too. You know, the rate of folks losing security clearances due to mental health issues is extremely low. And you know, DoD has you know, sent out information on this, and we're trying to publicize it throughout Coast Guard too. The flyer is less than 0.1% overall due to mental health reasons or behavioral health reasons. It's very low. So you know, when we are at these sorts of events, or you know, just having this information at hand to answer these common questions that service members and you know, anyone with a security clearance, or you know, to answer these questions they have would be really useful to destigmatize as well.
And that's one of the things about having this venue, is that it's a totally neutral spot. And Marty Parker, she's a 22-year FBI agent, and she actually said the same thing, that there's, within the FBI, there's still the stigma that if their agents reach out for mental health, that it can somehow affect, if a defense attorney gets hold of that, somehow it can affect their credibility. So to your point, education's a huge component of it, but also to have a neutral place where nobody's going to see you walk into a therapist's office and speculate, why are they going there? It's just a totally neutral practice. So that's one of the ideas as well.
Which is really hard to tear down that barrier. To that gentleman's point, it took the military 40 years of advocates coming forward to actually bring in, for the Marine Corps side of the house anyways, the PHOP program. So I don't know what it's going to take for the FBI or ATF or some of the other federal agencies to actually break down those barriers too. And it goes back to your point of education, right? It's a culture. It's creating that culture at the beginning, from the time that member comes into the service all the ways through, because the people coming in now are going to be the leaders 20 years from now. So if we can ingrain that now, that's what you're gonna set up that agency for success, but I don't know how you do it on the federal system-wise. I mean, you're gonna have to do a complete 180, right? And a lot of it has to do with how they do business, right? I'm not getting into the weeds, but that they're trusted a lot more with statements and certain types of how they do their investigations. That I think that's their reservation, is if someone's having an episode or they're dealing with something, is it affecting their judgment that can be challenged in court, right? So that's definitely a conversation that we could probably have it later on with a smaller core of people to see if we can branch out and kind of help them as well. But that's why I love this, because it's identifying the issues and seeing if we can actually reach out and help people on a broader scale.
There was a man, and I actually met him sailing. He came to us a few years ago, and he'd been a sniper for about 13 years. You met him, Jason. And clearly, as a sniper for 13 years, he's seen a lot and experienced a lot. He now runs a program in North Carolina helping veterans and first responders with post-traumatic stress. But he said a few months ago that one of the strong messages they put forth is, it's not what's wrong with you, it's what you've been through, it's what's happened to you. And so I think part of it is reframing it so that as we're trying to break down the stigma, there's nothing wrong with you. It's what you've experienced and what you're going through, and how do you channel that negative energy or those negative thoughts or the nightmares into something more positive, whether it's helping people, whether it's becoming a mentor, whether it's perhaps to the lady's point, cleaning up beaches, being a volunteer, working with kids, working with animals, doing something positive where you're taking your negative experiences, but you also have a group of people that you can do that with, that understand. You don't have to explain what caused your trauma, because you know the person next to you, man or woman, has experienced something similar, and you're safe. And now let's go clean up a beach together, or let's work with kids and teach them how to play basketball or something. So, go ahead.
I have a couple things. I mean, all the time. The Navy, actually, and then the other job was, everyone thinks they're the Lone Ranger. It's amazing, especially the folks that have always had responsibility. They don't think this has never happened to anyone else. And I think that's one of the big things, that once you realize you're not the Lone Ranger, that there's probably 10 people within 40 feet of you that are going through the same thing, that's how you kind of break down some of these barriers. And it is, I mean, the jumpers off the bridge, they're in a bad place. And then they cause more stress for people. Who helped them? How did they get help? Why did they drown? Eric and I, we met a year ago. I think I told everyone about this. We talked about it, and all the professionals I've been talking to is the year of mental health is coming. Well, it's not here yet. I mean, it's worse, but it's going to be coming. I think these things are cascading, especially in school systems. I think we've got a really long road to go here before we're out of this. And the question is, how do we get out of this? I mean, you need money first to do this. The question, how do people get here? We'll be glad to subsidize transportation. But this is a really big ship, and we have 29 people here, 15 full-time, 14 part-time. So that's why we're reaching out. We have the venue. I think we need to get it out. We need to get it out to the media. I mean, this would be something I would think the media would love to see happen. A group of people, just disparate people, a nonprofit, other nonprofits, Coast Guard, military, first responders, get together to try to figure this out, because the reason we're here is it's not working. And how do we figure that out? I mean, it works in some things. That's about the Marine Corps bringing it up. We're going to talk about your feelings. I mean, I never got asked how I felt. They didn't care. but we need to do that. And also, I think the same thing. I mean, we have the age groups are totally different. The younger folks, they will say, "Yeah, I'm hurting." It doesn't go to the veterans, the boomers. I mean, that's one of the Lone Ranger things. So, getting some folks together of these different age groups, different experiences, and letting them know it's okay to say, hey, look,
going through a real bad spot. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to put a stigma on it, we don't have to do anything, and that's why I'm really excited about us being together here to do this, because I think if this is a common sense approach to what we're trying to do. And you get in with the FBI, and you've got all these rules, and I can understand, I was a policeman for 2 years, I can understand about the investigator. I can understand about, wanting to testify, but, maybe society should step back and say, well, if it's not affecting their performance, then in fact it would be better for their performance if they had a release like that. But that's not happening now. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. The Lone Ranger's the big one. I mean, it's so many people that we help. And we've had a few folks on this ship that had PTS. They didn't think they did. Their families were telling them they did, and they finally recognized it. So it's just being caring. It's being at the lowest level, non-threatening, a non-threatening place to come. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to stay. But it's not going to get any better for you to be among your buddies. If it's a barbecue, if it's something else. So I'm really looking forward to working with everyone here.
So I want to share something else that we do at Station Golden Gate that might be useful to consider. Every month or so, Station Golden Gate has historically had a process group where those folks getting on shift, getting off shift, come together, just big circle, no table between them, and just talk. Leave rank at the door, respect confidentiality, and what says in the group stays in the group. So sort of a typical process group, if any of you have attended that you might imagine. When I first learned of this, and Chief Day was doing this first, we have another BHT, HS Lin Suhan there that's doing it now. When I first learned of this, I was sort of surprised at how much they appreciated that. But over time, I came to see why. And they weren't happening that regularly. Groups typically meet weekly, if it's like a psychotherapy, group process type group. This was monthly, and some were only able to attend because of their shifts every other month. But when this group was gapped, they wanted it back. And I believe it's because it provides a regular, safe space that people can know about and look forward to discuss and feel that sense of community and connection. And so we've taken this model, we're now expanding it. We're doing this at Sector San Francisco. We want to expand it more. And the reason is I've seen such a tremendous success with this, because it's unlike anything else that is offered in many places. It's just a space. It's not, there's no agenda. You can talk about what you want. And also, it's offered on-site at the unit, and it's not stigmatizing to attend because it's offered to everyone, and we're right here. You don't have to, drive across, a bridge and walk into a doctor's office to be able to do it, right? You don't have to drive, city traffic or whatever. We come to you and we're right here. So it's incredibly destigmatizing, and it's really changed the culture. So that could be a paradigm.
Thank you. Well, again, really appreciate everybody coming here, especially on a Sunday. I know that you all have other things you could be doing today, but I think it's really important, and I hope this has been a good first experience for everyone. This is just the beginning, and I think coming together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And if we save one life a year or two from now, I think we can all look back and think this is something really good we've done. So thank you, everyone. Unless there's anything else anybody would like to chime in with, let's save this for the next meeting.